So let's look at the story from Hezekiah from Isaiah. Let's rewind a couple thousand years, and Hezekiah was king during a very difficult, rough patch. Think of politics even messier than today's news cycle. The kingdom of Judah was facing threats from the powerful nation of Assyria. It was a brutal empire known for its aggression. But Hezekiah was different than many of the kings that went before him. You know, he boldly implemented spiritual reforms. He reopened the temple. He destroyed the idols. And he restored the worship of God and encouraged people to come back to their true faith in Yahweh. Now, these positive reforms helped renew and stabilize Judah during this incredibly turbulent time, mirroring what we've seen in the Bible recap thus far, especially through Isaiah, where judgment gives way to hope and ultimately redemption. Hezekiah's story reminds us the incredible impact that one man's wholehearted commitment to God can make, even in the toughest circumstances. So we pick up at the beginning of chapter 38 with just a kind of a difficult passage because Hezekiah seems to be doing everything right. And in the midst of all of this good that he's doing, the prophet Isaiah shows up, okay? Hezekiah has gotten really sick, right? And so he's hoping that when the prophet shows up, he'll proclaim that this miracle that's going to happen. And he doesn't. You know what Isaiah tells him? You're going to die. That's what he says. Put your stuff in order because this is coming to an end. Doesn't seem fair, does it? I mean, our children's message on Job, that's the first one. The first children's message on Job I've ever seen. Is that anybody else? I've been in ministry a long time. She goes, we're going to talk about Job. Really? That's where we're going? Hey. But it seems unfair. It seems weird that when something so good is happening, suffering strikes without any clear cause. And in that moment, Hezekiah physically and spiritually turns to the wall. It says he turns to the wall and he cries out to God. It's a profound moment of honesty, solitude, and surrender. Pete Scazzero, who wrote Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, calls this kind of moment hitting the wall. St. John of the Cross called it the deep night of the soul. It's the season where faith feels raw and uncertain and deeply personal. This is really what I love about Hezekiah. Earlier in his journey, when faced with the crisis in Assyria, you know what he did? He turned toward God. When under pressure of foreign threats, he sought Isaiah to pray together. When mocked by his enemies, and they sent him all kinds of letters across there saying how they were going to take him out, he took all of those letters to the temple and he put them down before God. He said, what are we going to do? And now when he's told that he's not even going to survive this illness, what does he do? Once again, he turns toward God. We all face the wall at some point in our lives. It's that sometimes it's a situation of health, sometimes it's a grief, sometimes it's a situation that doesn't make sense, sometimes it's just when we're so out of control we don't know what to do. The suffering doesn't seem fair. Just like Hezekiah, we have to answer the question, what do we do when it comes? Not if it comes. When it comes, what are we going to do? Some like to avoid the wall, but that rarely works. Many people like to ignore it or distract themselves from it. That's not super helpful. No, when we face the wall, And we will. If you're not now, you will. We turn toward God. We must turn to the only one who can do anything about it. We turn to him, and when the crisis hits, that's always our best move. And just a few verses later, so think about this. Hezekiah gets this. Isaiah leaves. He faces the wall, cries out to God, and he's asking all of these questions, right? And he finishes his prayer, and what happens? Isaiah walks back in. It's like he was talking to God, God was talking to Isaiah, and Isaiah walks back in, he goes, I have your answer. While he's still praying. He says, God heard your prayer, and he will add 15 years to your life. And here's a sign to prove it, in case you were wondering. Go back out to where the sundial is and watch it go backwards. Now, I have never seen time go backwards other than daylight savings time when they steal that hour from you every year, right? But God says, I hold time itself, and I can do what needs to be done. The miracle shows that God not only hears, but he holds power. And as you might imagine, Hezekiah is quite relieved. But he doesn't just say, wow, that's great, and move on. He took time to reflect and give thanks through the writing of a psalm, a song. Gratitude didn't erase his pain, but it transformed it into worship. This window into his soul is raw and poetic, about suffering, recovery, and new life. He wrote this, in the prime of my life, must I go through the gates of death and be robbed of the rest of my years? I waited patiently till dawn, but the lion, he broke all of my bones. Folks, this isn't a happy, clappy song. It's honest and vulnerable and deeply human. It describes life being cut off like a weaver removing fabric from the loom. But then something changes. He goes on, but what can I say? He has spoken to me, and he himself has done this. I will walk humbly all of my years because of this anguish of my soul. Hezekiah begins to understand that pain isn't a punishment, but purposeful. He recognizes that mercy reached him at the pit and restored him, body, mind, and soul. Modern psychology confirms that what Hezekiah demonstrated thousands of years ago, that expressing gratitude, especially after hardship, helps us heal. It strengthens resilience, sharpens perspective, and heals and deepens relationships. Gratitude, especially when expressed, becomes a bridge from pain to peace. So after acknowledging his suffering, Hezekiah offers one of the most surprising, I think, profound lines within the song. He says this, surely it was for my benefit that I suffered anguish. This isn't denial. This is transformation. That's hard to say. Gratitude doesn't always mean we're happy about what happened, but it does mean that we begin to see purpose even in the pain. Hezekiah recognizes that something has changed within him, deep within him, not just his health, but his spirit. He learned humility. He learned that he wasn't really in control. He walked differently because of what he'd gone through. He knew, as we often learn, that gratitude has a way of shifting our focus. Instead of dwelling on what was lost, he began to see what God could do through the experience. Wisdom, depth, compassion, clarity, faith. I mean, this is a critical shift. Gratitude becomes the lens that helps us look back on even our darkest chapters and say, even though God met me there. It's not that suffering was good, but that God was good in the midst of it. Hezekiah's story reminds us that the trials we'd never choose for ourselves often shape us in ways that we would never trade. The question is for us, can we ask God to help us see our own hardships through that lens? Can we be honest about the pain and open up to the possibility that something is being formed in us for the better? That kind of gratitude doesn't just say thank you. It says, I'm different because of this. And I'm grateful for what God did. Hezekiah realized something profound. His suffering wasn't meaningless. It was for his benefit. Gratitude has the power to transform trials into purposeful chapters of our stories. Finally, Hezekiah then moves from inward transformation to outward expression. He doesn't keep his gratitude to himself, but he brings it into the public square, into the temple. In verses 18 through 20, he declares that the living are the ones who give thanks, not the silent grave. And as long as he has breath, he's going to use it to sing. Hear these verses. The living, they praise you as I am doing today. Parents tell their children about your faithfulness. The Lord will save me, and we will sing with stringed instruments all the days of our life in the temple of the Lord. This is the natural culmination of healing and transformation. Public gratitude, a return to worship, a testimony to others. Gratitude is never meant to be silent. It overflows. It not only blesses us, but those around us and invites us and in the community into celebration. Today we see that spirit reflected in our service through baptism, a public act of faith and thanksgiving, through the faithful life and ministry of Lydia, whose example of love and service and witness has been a living testimony for us for years. Hezekiah reminds us that gratitude isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a deeper worship and contagious joy. Amen.